teams thought pot hunting became a sport at that point. And what that means is you go and you poke holes in the back of, or you dig up ancient ruins and see if you can find interesting artifacts. So we started getting pot hunters through here. And this was not as you see it today. It was pretty well covered with sand. So you either had to dig out a lot of sand or poke holes. And so that's what happened here. And this, if you want to pass this around so you can see it. That shows you the back wall of Pueblo Bonito and all the sand that was on it. And the next major thing to happen was when a fellow named Richard Wetherill was talked into coming down. If you've been up to Mesa Verde, you may have heard of him. He was an amateur archaeologist and a rancher who had settled in Mesa Verde, but he'd explored a great deal of the Southwest, and he'd heard about Pueblo Bonito and wanted to come down, but it wasn't until a family of 5 musicians came by and talked him into coming, because they wanted to see it too. They finally got him to come down. It took him about 2 days in buckboard, so no more complaints about the roads. And he got here and he absolutely fell in love. He homesteaded near Pueblo Bonito and included Pueblo Bonito and Chaco in the homestead. He married the musician's daughter, Marietta, and set up a trading post here. And he actually talked a couple of rich guys back east into financing 4 summers worth of archaeological digs here in Pueblo Bonito. Harvard threw in an archaeological grad student named Pepper, and the American Museum of Natural History in New York City gave the expeditions their name. So they got all the stuff that they discovered. So again, when they got here, it was pretty well covered with sand, and they dug out about 190 rooms. And when you look at the rooms today, they're going to be pretty empty. They were not empty when those guys came through. This is one of the richest sites in the entire Southwest. By the end of those 4 years, they had sent back to the museum in New York City over 50,000 pieces of turquoise, over 10,000 pots, over 5,000 stone and bone implements, over 1,000 wood implements, and all sorts of... So it was all over the place, and beautifully worked turquoise and jet and argillite, which is like a clay stone of different colors. They made some gorgeous stuff here. So Wetherill continued his trading post, and he actually was rumored to be selling some of the stuff out of his trading post that he was digging out here. And the folks at the University of New Mexico got a little concerned and asked Congress to come and investigate. And their conclusion was that that was pretty much the way any archaeologist was operating in those time periods. So they let him continue. But by 1906, we got the Antiquities Act, which then made it illegal to sell any of the artifacts and also protected these structures. And in 1907, we became Chaco Canyon National Monument. And that was a big excitement until, well, Richard Wetherill then lost Pueblo Bonito and Chaco from his homestead. He did, however, continue to run his trading post here until 1910, when he was running his cattle through the South Gap and was shot. At that point, he was buried there in the cemetery, and his wife moved to Cuba. Not the country, the little city between here and Albuquerque. When I first heard that, I had a picture of her, you know, doing the salsa dances and smoking the cigars. No, down there in Cuba, New Mexico, and lived a long and healthy life into her 80s. And then when she died, she was brought back here, and you can see her grave down there as well. And there's somebody named Richard, which I'm guessing is one of the offspring, but I forgot to look it up, so can't tell you for sure. And that was the last excitement before the 1920s when another fellow named Judd came in, and he is commemorated on the next plaque. So why don't we go and read that?
Accumulated over the centuries. They accurately reconstructed parts of destroyed walls to match the ancient masonry. And I gotta read the bottom part?
You don't have to read the small print, that's okay. No.
This tablet was presented by the National Geographic Society. 1957, National Park Service.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so this talks about Judd and his 7 summers here. And actually, if you've been here then, you might have been given a tour by him, because I'm told he was also given tours. But of course, his main thing to do was dig stuff out, and he found plenty of stuff in the next 130 odd rooms, and sent all that stuff back to guess where? The Smithsonian Institution. So if you want to see that stuff, go ask to look at their basement. I think there might be a pot or two on display, but I'm not sure. So if anybody sees one, please send us a postcard and let us know. After digging all that stuff out, instead of just dumping the dirt in the room next door, he took it all and dumped it in the wash.
Oh no.
Yeah. Why do you say oh no?
Because it's a
There's
wash.
stuff in it.
Yeah, and what's so bad about that? It just washes away to the ocean.
Dams it up. Dams it up, yeah.
Well, no, it didn't dam it up. What it did was it lost us all that lovely stuff, like all the pollen and all. Well over 1,000 people in here. He then looked at the construction techniques. The way they built the roofs was that they put timbers in one direction, big timbers, and smaller timbers and branches in the other direction. Covered that with brush and then put some plaster on top of that. So he looked around to see how many trees would have to be cut down to make the rooms in all the canyon. And he came up with a number right around 250,000 trees. And that's what he thought. He thought, oh, well, there used to be trees here, so they cut them down and they made a desert here, so then they couldn't live here anymore, and that's why they left. And that's what he thought. And in future, people coming through, they couldn't find any evidence of those forests. But this was still the company line for the next few decades, until about the 70s, when the University of New Mexico and the Park Service got together to do the Chaco project, which was a 12-year extensive survey of the canyon, and then later on they did a several-year analysis of the data that had been gotten in those 12 years. And I can talk more about what they found when we get up there where those folks are. But in between this and that, we had a little bit of excitement back here, which I'd like to talk about. I'm actually a geophysicist. I'm here through the Geological Society of America, so I can't resist putting a little geology in. So let's go up to where that big rock is sticking out, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the geology.